Well, good evening, everybody. I'm starting a little bit early before Edward, Allen, Marlowe, and Bob Belvin join us tonight here live on YouTube and on Twitter. My name is Harry Schroeder. It's going to be called Voices of the Valley. One of the things we do here at valleyhoopsinsider.com is we love to talk to the writers, the announcers, the broadcasters, the people behind the scenes that you hear. You read their information, the podcasters, the website hosts that really know the heart and soul of both the Ohio Valley Conference and the Missouri Valley Conference. And tonight, two of the very best, Edward Allen Marlowe and Bob Belvin, guys that have been around the OVC and around specific programs at times in the past in a very deep way. As you know, a ton of different things have happened in the Ohio Valley Conference in the last, several months. Eastern Kentucky, Jacksonville State both pulled out of the league as of July 1. We covered that in depth with some of the writers and reporters around that back in the spring when it was all coming out. And now Austin Peay University has opted out, and they will for next July. So it's a time of transition and of change for the Ohio Valley Conference. And we're going to talk to Ed Marlowe and Bob Belvin about that in just a few minutes. Actually going live, people are expecting us at 7:30 tonight on Twitter, but we're getting a little jump start here to make sure all the technicalities and the technical things are working. If you'd like to submit a question tonight for Mr. Marlowe or Mr. Belvin, you may do so, I believe, on Twitter. I think you can do that, and I think I can see it, and we'll be able to ask them those questions as well. I don't know if I told you, my name is Harry Schroeder, editor of the site valleyhoopsinsider.com. We cover the Missouri Valley Conference, the Ohio Valley Conference, as well as we dabble a little bit with St. Louis University since we're planted here in St. Louis, Missouri. And occasionally we will dive into some high school things if they come our way as well. A lot of great high school basketball talent in the St. Louis area that then matriculates to the OVC and the MVC. And so we like to kind of try to pay attention to all of that as well. So that's valleyhoopsinsider.com. And recently I've just joined up with, I'm a contributor, a writer for bustingbrackets.com, bustingbrackets.com. Now they cover college basketball all over. I mean, they're an intense site that do a lot of great things. I, again, am writing particularly for the Missouri Valley Conference and the Ohio Valley Conference for bustingbrackets.com. So far in the last couple of weeks, we've put out stories on Southern Illinois University, Northern Iowa, and Belmont so far. From the OVC, working on a Loyola piece right now, a Southern Illinois Edwardsville piece coming out shortly as well. Later this week, I'm going to have the opportunity to talk it over with Morehead State coach Preston Spradlin. We're going to break down Morehead State a little bit later in the week as well. And then even after that, we'll be talking with Bradley head coach Brian Wardle. So we're going to try to get all of the different OVC and MVC teams on the Busting Brackets website as well. So we're going to be talking things over about the changes, all of the dynamic changes going on in the Ohio Valley Conference with our friends Bob Belvin and Edward Allen Marlowe. I like how he puts that whole name out there on Twitter. We're going to find out all about that in just a minute. We'll welcome both of those guys in. There is Bob. There is Edward. They are both with us. I don't like you guys being so small. Let me do it this way. Now, so much better. Listen, welcome to the program, you guys, and I appreciate you joining us tonight talking about the changes and the dynamic kinds of things that are going on in the Ohio Valley Conference. And I know that you guys will have a greater sense of the pulse of all that's going on. Before we get to that, I want our readers, listeners, and so forth to get to know you guys a little bit. First, you, Bob, tell us who you are, what you do, what you cover, what you're all about. I know you a little bit, but I want the people on our site and on this podcast to get to know you.
Hey, you're so gracious. Good evening and welcome. I hope these storms that are still on top of us where I'm at have passed you guys to the west. I've been affiliated with the Ohio Valley Conference for 20 plus years now and have known it as my home conference, if you will, since an undergrad at Austin Peay way back in the mid 80s. So as you well know, I have quite a bit of perspective on that as it comes to it, and been able to work on both the television broadcast streams, with the ESPN family networks for both football and basketball for some time now. So really looking forward to this discussion tonight, because I think we've got both angles, both perspectives covered. But I've really enjoyed my affiliation with the conference. I will undeniably tell you I'm a homer for the OVC. So let's just go ahead and get that disclaimer. Yeah, let's get that disclaimer out of the way right now.
Absolutely.
Undeniably. But there are some dynamics, a great adjective too, Harry. I really like that. Developing, never the same, imminent, all of those kinds of words will come about as well. So it's been my home. I've had the pleasure of working with 2 different commissioners at the conference, and some other things we'll talk about as well. Entirely fantastic staffs there, and they do their dead level best to support the student athlete, and they genuinely have that mission in mind.
Now, Edward Allen Marlowe, whenever anybody wants their name to be semi-formal, I have to know more about that. WKDZ radio, is that correct? Am I doing that right? And then tell us about the whole lengthy name on Twitter there.
Yes, sir. Yeah, that's correct. No, my affiliation with the OVC is it's slightly one-sided. I'm a Murray State graduate. Worked at the Murray Ledger and Times. Graduated from the Murray State News in 2012. Kind of was late to the newspaper game, and then for 7 years I was the beat reporter for Murray State athletics while at the Paducah Sun. And unfortunately, lost my job in January, and my wife and I still live in Murray. And in June, took a job with my hometown radio station in WKDZ, which is in Cadiz, Kentucky, about 25-30 minutes east here of Murray. So still close by, still pay attention to what's going on with the Ohio Valley Conference, and still have a lot of connections inside the office, and just care a lot about the league. I've always, somebody called me an OVC apologist a week ago, and I didn't feel so bad about it, actually. But I think the main reason my name is so long on Twitter is I created that account like 11 years ago, and I just didn't change it, and it stuck. So here we are. I go by Ed. Nothing difficult about it, but I love the league. I love what it represents, and I know right now is an interesting. I don't know if tumultuous is the right word. I think maybe there's a backup plan, but it's a very interesting time and where the league is probably headed.
Ed, before we move on, I do want to ask Dream Marlowe. Tell me about that. Your Twitter handle.
That's actually intentional. I made a joke once that I was in college. I started college in 2003, which the OVC was certainly shaping up. It had been a great league prior to that. But if you really think about the golden age of basketball, and I know I wasn't alive for the 70s and the early 80s. I was born in 1985. So I know that basketball was really good before then. But if you really think about just the amount of NBA productivity that's come out of the OVC since 2003, it's pretty impressive. But jokes aside, when I originally went to college at Murray State in 2003, I thought I was going to get 12 years of college and get my doctorate. And Dr. E.A. Marlowe would have been dream. The joke is, though, that I did go to college long enough for a doctorate, but only walked away with a bachelor's degree. So that is where we are. So
perfect. Well, as people know, and people that are watching this right now, they know that the OVC has been going through some transitions, some difficult things going on. Jacksonville State, Eastern Kentucky leave in July, and now all of a sudden Austin Peay announces that they're leaving as well. And so, as a somewhat of an apologist myself, Ed, I'm a traditionalist. I think stay together forever. This really bothers me just at an emotional level. Might be a great move for Austin Peay. It might turn out to be a great move for the league. Who knows? But I'm one of those guys that just says stay forever, and like I think Kansas ought to still be in the Missouri Valley Conference. They were in there a long time ago. So I'm bad that way. So first, let's walk through the guts of it a little bit there. Bob, you being an Austin Peay guy, tell us a little bit why this makes sense for Austin Peay.
First of all, I'm still shaking because I graduated 2 years after Ed was born, and I graduated from Austin Peay, so I'm a little shaky there. What he doesn't know is, before I get to answer that question, the WKDZ studios are formerly a Hardee's right there at I-24. He's nodding his head. Yes, I know that. I have a lot of family there, Ed, so you're okay. You're safe with me. And
I've got a dog in the background. I don't want her to start barking as we're talking, but no, I grew up with that studio. Yep. Being a Hardee's, my first cousin worked there. I got breakfast there. Pretty much everybody actually knows where the studio is, because if you're on your way to Nashville, which is the heart of the Ohio Valley Conference, our studio glows in the dark right across from the McDonald's on the way to Nashville. So that is my place of employment, and I'm happy to say I'm really enjoying my time there. So yeah, definitely remember the Hardee's for sure.
Yeah, we have a couple of things in common in terms of the founder of that station, one of the owners of that station I worked for many moons ago. So this whole situation relative to Austin Peay making the move, I think has its roots and origins inside of a year, Harry, to answer your question. I think that's really where this kind of accelerated. A couple of things I'll never forget. Doing a Plus game, ESPN Plus basketball game at the Dunn Center back in January. And unofficially, the Jacksonville State folks were there, Jacksonville State, Austin Peay doubleheader. Unfortunately, they were kind of saying their goodbyes, if you will. Everything from Mike Paris, the voice of JSU, Greg Seitz, the athletic director, was there at the time. And I'll never forget when I was leaving, always speaks to me, always goes out of their way to speak to me. But Gerald Harrison, the athletic director at Austin Peay, and Greg Seitz, the athletic director at Jacksonville State, were at the back. And frankly, all they could do was just kind of politely wave at me. It wasn't that kind of embrace. And so you could kind of get the feelings of that. There's just a lot of rumble throughout, the end of the spring semester last year. And over the summer, I think a lot of that talk accelerated a lot, to the point that about 3 weeks ago, a very good friend of mine who's very well heeled in terms of knowing people called me and said, "Hey, this is going to happen." I was like, why would they, given the circumstances, given the dramatic changes that are going on, why would you make that move? And I say changes going on because we're going to frame that purely, if we were to frame that purely in a basketball sense, I got 2 new head coaches,
right,
and a new arena up in 2022, 23. They'll probably be in somewhere in that range there. The brand new F&M Bank Arena just really steps from campus. That's a whole nother story too. So this whole thing really accelerated during that period of time. And it became more and more apparent that they may actually do this. Admittedly, given some of the financial constraints that they allege to be under, I'm actually shocked that someone ponied up the $1 million exit fee. I really am in this day and time. So, if that was what was holding them up, I'm surprised that some folks really, ponied up when they're going to have to be asked to be a big part of that new arena and a lot of opportunities there. That's going to cause the need for dollars. So that's kind of where it was. I just I don't see it on a lot of different fronts, and we'll explore that, I'm sure, later on. But it's really accelerated, and once over the summer, it really accelerated, and it came to a head at some point in time, late August, the 1st of this month.
Ed, before we get into maybe some of the reasons that, we hear football drives everything these days. But Ed, you had a lengthy blog you put out. Maybe it was today. I read it today. I guess you put it out today about your initial reactions, your emotional reactions, then moving it forward. Tell us about just your first thoughts. You hear the governors are leaving, the program is leaving, the OVC takes another blow. Your initial thoughts.
The tough part about it, so Harry, I wrote that at 1:30 this morning, and I told my wife, I said it was coffee induced inspiration. Really what it was somebody telling me to take the 24-hour rule, and 24 ended up being 48, being 72, 96. I just didn't want to overreact. And I think for me, number one, Sure, it's easy for me to apologize for the OVC. I love the league. It's been around since 1948. Murray State, Western, EKU, I had Moorhead early in the history, all founders of the OVC. So to me, I think it's impervious to what college athletics is doing right now, but that maybe isn't the case. So I think a lot of my initial thoughts all spiraled around 2017 when Harry and I, you and I became quickly acquainted because we thought we were going to be in the Missouri Valley. So, it just ended up being one of those things where I had multiple text messages barraging me. And granted, I think that's the number one sign that people care. People care about their programs. People care about the league. They care about new leagues. Is the OVC folding? I was trying to sort through a lot of that. I had friends texting me, family being like, what are we doing? What's happening? Where is this all going? What's Austin Peay doing? Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? And so because of all of that stimuli over about I'd say 12 hours, I was actually at work at WKDZ and I was like, guys, I'm useless. Like, I just don't have me do anything for at least the next hour. Let me process what is happening right now with the Atlantic Sun. And I think initially, just to answer your question, Harry, I actually wasn't surprised because Austin Peay was one of 3 schools to play football in the fall alongside EKU and JSU. And I told somebody in the fall, I said, the reason you play in the fall, COVID be danged, is because you're ponying up cash for an exit fee. And, I know Austin Peay's schedule wasn't necessarily as rigorous or as well paying as maybe JSU and EKU. EKU went out there and just said, the heck with this. We're going to go get our $1 million and then just not pay anybody for it.
Sure.
But I hope somebody from EKU is watching because it's totally true. They're being sued right now.
Yes.
For not paying their exit fee. But I digress. Originally, my initial thought was I'm not surprised. They have the new arena going up, a lot of changes, and they played football in the fall. So I know that sounds kind of elementary, but I just felt like with them playing football in the fall, I saw it coming. And the ASUN was rumored 6-8 months ago. We knew the commission came out, and that has been very tight-lipped. I'm really would love to get my hands on a couple of documents from those discussions, but the search firm came out, and it just seemed like a matter of time before somebody was going to announce, and I'm just not surprised it was the Governors.
So Austin Peay moves to the ASUN. So 3 teams from the Ohio Valley Conference move that direction. That's painful enough. As a basketball guy, I'm always ticked off when things happen because of football, Bob Belvin, and you're close to that Clark, to the APSU program, and football driving this. Is that really bottom line, or is it more than that for Austin Peay?
Let me spin it a different way. First of all, let me just 10,000 foot view. I think this is a bad business decision by Austin Peay. Bad for business. So if we're going to talk the business side of it, I think you have to take a look at what's going on at Tennessee State. So that's where it kind of makes me, is this really a football decision or not? Because you can't play football in the new arena that's being built in Clarksville. So just consider that for a moment. I think Austin Peay is, in their minds, a little further along with their football program than they really are, and we're going to find that out over the next coming weeks. To include, ironically, them playing at an now FBS school in Eastern Kentucky on Saturday. We'll get a really, really good measuring stick there. I have a hard time believing this is all about football. I just really do, but it's also very concerning to them, I think, what's going on at Tennessee State. First of all, it probably will take Ed would know this, probably will take a Freedom of Information Act inquiry to find out how much federal money these schools got during the COVID era. I think that factors into this. I think this factors into this. Secondly, looking at what's going on at Tennessee State, the Eddie George hire, the Penny Collins hire before that in basketball, the 1 million plus that Robert Covington gave them for basketball. And can you believe it? The NIL, I think, plays into this because of the young man whose father is a rap star, who's now signed an NIL deal
playing
on
with
the Tennessee State basketball team.
Right.
I think this has a lot to do with that, really. And I think Gerald Henderson's comments yesterday about we could be a big fish in a small pond. I'm going to take high disagreement with that in a couple of different areas. First of all, I think that was a shot across the bow at Murray State. I really, really do. And help me understand if Austin Peay has been dominant over Murray State in basketball or in football recently. And the answer to that's probably no. So there's a little bit of gamesmanship going on there. I think this move has everything to do with what Tennessee State is positioning themselves to do. And, again, I think it may be federal COVID aid that's going to these universities. The new athletic director there obviously made a splash hire, ironically, in the spring after, the spring football season was over with, because the Eddie George hire was made April 12th. So I think it, as much as, and we can frame this around basketball too, but I think football, in the concerns that they have with Tennessee State awakening, if you will, I think that had a big part of it.
And Ed, do you, thinking about the football component, but do you think there are other issues you alluded to in your blog about some times when the Ohio Valley was looking at some other schools and didn't pull the trigger, and that maybe there was some discontent sown there? I heard some stories like that last year when we were covering, Eastern Kentucky leaving. Your thoughts beyond football, or is it exclusively a football decision?
Well, it's been widely reported that the ASUN is going to pursue FBS football as they continue to collect powers. I mean, it's no question that bringing in North Alabama, which, tried to join the OVC in 2011, and bringing in actually Central Arkansas, which I've been privately told, I think, inquired about OVC possibilities 2 or 3, 4 or 5 years ago. I don't want to ballpark it. I don't have privy to those private conversations, but I think in 2011, right when I was kind of getting into the game of covering college athletics, I wrote about it in my blog, hindsight's 2020, but it feels so painful now to see North Alabama starting to do its thing. Northern Kentucky needs little introduction. Their men's basketball program has been pretty special over the last few years, done some kind of unique things, done so well in the Horizon League. If you have both of those guys in the Ohio Valley Conference, I think it's possible, maybe not likely, but it's possible EKU maybe reconsiders. But I think EKU and Moorhead, from what I've been told, maybe were afraid NKU was going to become a regional power and kind of draw away from them and their fan bases there in Northern Kentucky. I could be wrong there, but I don't know. There apparently in 2011, 3 OVC presidents voted no against expansion. And if you think about the timeline, that's not long after SIU Edwardsville was added. Jacksonville State was kind of in the mix of being added. They'd been around for a little while. Didn't take them long to get going, thanks to Alabama's lovely state dollars. Belmont was already reported to be in a couple of years later. So it's just one of those situations where I think presidents maybe sat on their hands and said, well, we've added enough. Why do we want to spend and add more, create more travel, create this, create that? Where, maybe in that moment they didn't see where college athletics was headed 10 years down the road. But I think a little bit more progressive thinking, you add those two teams and we're not having this conversation. We're probably having a different conversation about how powerful the OVC has become and who's next. Maybe it's a 16-team league. So it's a tough call.
Bob, I want to pick up on that. The ramifications for the OVC to lose, Eastern Kentucky, Jacksonville State, now Austin Peay, down to 9 teams. I talked to somebody last week and they said, listen, the OVC has been working on this. They know it's been coming. Don't be surprised if you see another team, another university added in the relatively near future. But that's, then you start looking at lists and what schools and we can do kind of that game tonight. But the ramifications, it's negative for the league right now that 3 programs have just exited. It makes it look, if not true, it at least makes it look like the league is in a place of weakness or struggle.
Well, it's a net negative. It just is. When you lose, and we're talking about really good brands here too. I mean, Eastern Kentucky is trying to ramp up their football. Their facilities, frankly, need some work. Jacksonville State is state of the art. To Ed's point about the Alabama money, that took care of that quite well, and Austin Peay is surging. They really feel that way. So yeah, I think it's a net negative. I think you can use the blueprint of what the ASUN is trying to do with not everybody playing football again. That's always the big argument. Will always be. We spend till midnight on that. But the point being is that you got to look at how you want to balance it, how you want to balance those kinds of schedules. I think anything in the next year will be adding for public sentiment to move public sentiment in their favor. And you and I had a similar conversation, Harry, back in January, February, I believe, about this very thing when right after the Eastern and Jacksonville State announcement was put forward. So I think it's a net negative. I tell you, one thing I really want to add is that none of the presidents in the conference that hired Beth DeBusch are at their respective universities now. So that's turned over for her tremendously. And that could also be a positive to you as well. And I know Austin Peay's undergone that same thing as well. And Dr. Licari, the new president of Austin Peay, said a couple of weeks ago, the traditional I'm drinking, what is it, trying to catch a fire hose in a Dixie cup kind of analogy that we use here in the South. He had a lot going on. So I think when the Board of Trustees at Austin Peay made this decision, I think he just kind of rubber stamped it, or they told him this is what they were going to do. I think we're in a situation not to discredit Dr. Licari at all. I just don't think he had a really good perspective of the landscape. And again, a lot of this was in the works before he came on the 1st of March. So yeah, I see it as a net negative of the conference. My opinion would be to hold tight. And I think I'll pass it to Ed. What is Murray State going to do now? Should that shoe drop? It's not. If there's such a thing as a double net negative, I think you would see that.
There's so many ramifications, as you guys know. There's the public image. There's also the loss of a real hallmark program in the OVC. When I think of the Ohio Valley Conference, Austin Peay is one of those teams I really think about. I identify with them. And as we know, college athletics is under such a dynamic transformation going on right now with free agency and NIL and teams moving at that much higher level. And now, in what we call mid-major levels or whatever. And so I do wonder, Ed, like you said, we got to know each other a little bit several years ago when it looked like Murray might be moving to the Missouri Valley Conference. What kind of temptation is there now for Belmont or Murray to look other places? Or you guys are mentioning Tennessee State. It could be any program, right? Right now, they could be, any of them could be looking at something. But I think Murray in particular is a team that I think would be very interesting to some other conferences.
Ooh, that's a big bowl of soup to try and chew on. Because I'm not an athletic director, nor do I want to get in front of one at the moment. But the one thing that I will say, Harry and Bob, first of all, what an excellent point about the presidents. Times have changed. Beth has remained, but the university presidents have all just kind of been a revolving door around her.
That's an amazing point, Bob. By the way, you said that, and I kind of like, what? That's crazy.
That's right. Yeah, it's absolutely fascinating to even think about it from that perspective, where she's essentially on, I believe, I'd have lost count, maybe her third or fourth contract extension. But university presidents have changed. And that's leadership. We see that at all levels of civic life, how that can tend to work out. I appreciate, and I actually am going to adhere to what Bob has had to say. I like the idea of just standing pat. I know that maybe sounds like Rome is crumbling, and you're just watching it kind of burn all around you. I don't necessarily think that's the case. I think people are forgetting that certain board presidents, several board presidents, have been observing this from the very beginning of earlier this year, that there is a search firm. There are some details about teams that have inquired within, and that some of that needs to come to light. I don't expect Murray State University to just jump out in front of everything and say, hold the phones, here's what's happening. I think that's the one thing that's been relatively impressive, is that no data has leaked from these conversations. Now, I think it's probably a little telling that Austin Peay's president and athletic director were kind of part of that original first search committee. And maybe they didn't like what was going on and they said, sayonara, we're out of here. But that doesn't necessarily mean that everybody else is about to bolt and jump ship as well. I keep hearing rumors about Tennessee State going to the SWAC or the MEAC, but I'm not sure I see that. See, there's a puppy.
I believed you. Well, I believed you before, and we have evidence now.
I don't see the SWAC or the MEAC as being intriguing options for Tennessee State, but I could be totally wrong. I'm of the notion that if you don't want to be in the conference, don't be in the conference. And if you have an invitation elsewhere, take it, because you're only a detriment to the league that you're in if you're not wanting to be a part of the process of continuing to build it. That being said, Harry, you probably know this a little bit better than me, being closer to Arch Madness, but I don't know what comes first. What came first in 2017? Was it the fact that presidents and the board of directors, so to speak, for the Missouri Valley chose to only select one team and they decided to go with Valpo? Or did they take a look at the possibility of three teams and maybe things got too big for Murray State? Because I've been told by more than one source that after quite a bit of exploration, Murray State maybe wasn't as prepared financially to join the Missouri Valley as maybe originally perceived. Do you have any sort of read on that at all?
The thing that I kept hearing was that they either had to do 3 or 1, and they never found a third team, a third program. Clearly, they thought Murray State would fit. At least that's what the impression that people have told me. They thought Murray would fit, would be a great fit. And honestly, it came. What I was told on multiple occasions was, if this was a blind draw, we would probably take Murray. But Valpo had finished second in a previous round, and so it's almost like they owed Valpo the entry. I've heard that from so many different sources. May or may not be true, but a number of people have told me that. And as a Missouri Valley guy, and then watching what Murray obviously does year in and year out, you think, wow, this league would, the Missouri Valley Conference would be so much stronger with Murray State in it, and Murray State and Valpo, or however it would have shaken out. But yeah, I think there's always various factors. And Bob, I wanted to ask you, talking about financially available or whatever, as Ed was mentioning, EKU and Jacksonville State, at least at one point, both of them were being sued because they weren't paying the $1 million exit fee. And has Austin Peay said they're going to pay it? And
yes.
Okay, well, that's good. That's good to know.
With private dollars, which is just remarkable to me for an institution and an athletic department that supposedly operates on such a thread. It's just really surprising to me that, and maybe we need to give where credit due. If Gerald Henderson, the athletic director, and Dr. Michael Lucari, the president, felt compelled enough to convince the board of trustees to vote this in, then they got the money from within. And that was a pointed question at yesterday's press conference, and it was refuted immediately. We'll play with it for private funds. I was shocked that it's just hard to believe that you would want out that bad that you would go out and solicit that kind of money.
It's amazing, isn't it?
it's just incredible.
So I do want to ask both of you, let's say the OVC is dead set on, we have to add a 10th team, a 10th university, a 10th member. Is there an odds-on favorite? This is the school that makes the most sense. First, you, Ed.
Ooh, I have a wish list. Does that count? We're getting
sure,
close.
Why not? Why not?
My wish list would be to do whatever you can to get East Tennessee State and Chattanooga. I would absolutely do cartwheels in my muddy front yard tonight if somebody told me that was a possibility. I continue to hear Western Illinois as a likely candidate for the Ohio Valley Conference, or at least that exploration. I think a dark horse, because I think it'd be a lot of fun, is to convince the University of Southern Indiana, USI, to jump from Division II to Division I. I don't think that's going to happen. I think this is unfortunate timing. It's terrible what COVID-19 has done, not just to the world, but if we're going to turn it into an economic discussion, this is tough. Over the last 18 months, a lot of revenue is just not out there to glean upon. That being said, I'd have to think probably Western Illinois. No disrespect to Western Illinois, I don't necessarily think they're at the top of my wish list. But if you're looking at a realistic realignment, them and maybe ask Moorhead to flip to scholarship football, I think that would reinforce. Look at what Moorhead did to Austin Peay just recently. I don't want to say did. It was Austin Peay won 59-35 in a shootout, but Moorhead State's a decent program that's trying to get back in that D1 status for football. And out of the Pioneer. Well, they have D1 status, but they're wanting to get out of the Pioneer League and back to scholarship, from what I've been told. So I think you start there. Aim small, miss small, I guess is a good way to look at it, and see if you can bite into a bigger cookie. If you get somebody like Chattanooga, maybe Arkansas, Little Rock, Alabama State, somebody calling from that realm, that would be incredible. But I'm just, at this point, damage control, I think, is the most important thing.
Bob, if they are dead set on it, is there a university, is there a program out there that makes the most sense to you?
I would find a hard time Chattanooga and ETSU leaving the SoCon. That to me is a pretty good situation for them. The geographic sense makes sense in that case. That would be the top of my list. So I would change a little bit of Ed's philosophy, and I'd say make them say no. That would be my first approach to that. The Alabama State and Arkansas Little Rock piece is a nice geographic fit. And I think those two should actually be under consideration as well. I think they're like size universities. And to Ed's point, I think they really missed out on the Central Arkansas. Ironically, the former provost of Austin Peay is now the president at the University or Central Arkansas. So wow. It's crazy, some of those, and that would be Dr. Houston Davis. So it's crazy, those kind of intertwinings right there. But yes, I would go southeastern tier. I would make Chattanooga and ETSU say no, and then Alabama State, Arkansas, Little Rock to me makes really good sense.
From a long way away, to me, why isn't Lipscomb on the top of the list? And maybe that's a bad idea. Yeah. I'm just saying from way far away here in St. Louis, I just think Lipscomb, they're perfect. Tell me why that's not a good idea.
I can't. I can't. Other than do you have to replace a football-centric school? They don't play football. Yeah, and again, you and I spoke about that in the past. That is the market. That is the major media market you need to have, which is Nashville, right? So, if you lose Tennessee State, you would want to have something there that may keep a Tennessee State in the league. If you got someone, I don't know, they're probably 5 miles apart, those two schools. So I can't think of a reason why you wouldn't talk to them, Harry. I really can't. Again, unless you got to have a football playing school.
In the Missouri Valley, there's this constant battle over the years of of the private schools and the public schools. The public institutions and the private institutions. They are always trying to keep that balance going. And in the Missouri Valley Conference, Indiana State, Valpo, they both play in that Pioneer League, not in the Missouri Valley Conference. But so you guys are talking about a football centric school that would be in the Ohio Valley Football Conference.
I think that needs to be the catch in it, Harry. I really do. I don't think any other scenario, and as we've talked about, I'm a football guy, right? Or at least get that rap at times. I think that's where you've got to look and lean. And I'm not super opposed to maybe adding a non-football playing school if you could get Moorhead straight in their football and get it squared away and make them competitive.
Before I let the two of you go, so I said if they're dead set on it, what do you think, Ed, they will do? What do you think Beth DeBusch and the leadership of the OVC, what do you think they will do?
Well, I want to tie your question into some of the things that Bob just said. I didn't want to interrupt him, but I'm a heck yeah on Lipscomb. Some people maybe don't agree, but Lipscomb Battle of the Boulevard with Belmont twice a year.
Spectacular.
Lipscomb, obviously Belmont's men's basketball coach, Casey Alexander, knows both programs well. You would continue to solidify that footprint in Nashville. I think best case scenario, if you can land 3 teams, 2 of them need to be football playing schools. That brings you back to 8. And just in case you lose one, you still keep your auto bid. That you have to have 6 football teams to keep your FCS auto bid for a championship. So you've got to do that. So I think best case scenario, home run would be like, give me Robert Morris, Youngstown State, ETSU, and Chattanooga, and let's just form a super conference. But Harry, just to mention that, and Bob, you mentioned it too. You look at the NCAA RPI from last year, the SoCon was 9th in college basketball. So, they're probably not going to want to drop down to the 22nd ranked Ohio Valley Conference. So that's probably not a good idea. But like I said, just a wish list. Best case scenario, I hope the Ohio Valley Conference has 3 teams on the line. I'd be fine if one of those teams was a Division II team that maybe was up and coming. It's unfortunate that wasn't Bellarmine, which is, of course, now
another miss. I thought that was a miss. Yes.
Yeah, that's a miss. And we're counting a lot of misses. That's unfortunate. I do love the fact that Murray State's playing Bellarmine this year. I've always said, shameless plug here really quick. I've always said that Kentucky should have a state championship. You have enough Division I college basketball teams to form a 7 or 8 team tournament to battle for all of the Kentucky marbles. But I've digressed. The best case scenario, Harry and Bob, I think is 3 teams. One of them is Lipscomb. One of them is perhaps an up and coming Division II team that is enticed with a discount on the entry fee. And then probably, you either convince Moorhead to bring its football program along to division, to scholarship football, or you bring in Western Illinois. Some combination of that. Maybe there's a dark horse team out there, a dark horse school that has already called the OVC. But we're seeing some common threads here. Moorhead, Western Illinois, maybe Lipscomb. Maybe Lipscomb says, oh, you know what, it's been fun in the A-Sun, but we want to join our friends in Belmont that did it in 2013. So I think that's probably the best case scenario.
And Bob, what do you think the league will do?
I like that scenario of adding 3. Can you get 3 right now is a big concern, and I think the answer to that is no. I think adding 1, go for 3, and let's see what we can do. See how we can make it happen.
And Bob, where will you be this weekend broadcasting games?
I am off this weekend.
What?
I am actually.
I thought you worked 58 days a month.
Well, I have this thing called a real job that kind of gets in the way.
Don't you hate that? Yeah.
No, all kidding aside, there is not an OVC, ESPN 3 or football package. So primarily that is now the assignment of the respective home schools throughout. So I have a select group of Conference USA games I'm doing this year. And my next one is not until October 30th, when ironically, Will Healy brings the Charlotte team to Western Kentucky to take on Western Kentucky. Will Healy being the former coach at Austin Peay, that kind of probably helped get this conversation going with the explosion that's been Austin Peay football in the last 4 to 5 seasons.
Well, listen, I appreciate the time, you guys. I wanted to break this down, let some people hear from some people that know stuff. I am so much, I know so much less than the two of you about the inner workings and the things going on in the OVC. And so I immediately reached out to you guys. I appreciate the time tonight. Ed, where can people, they can follow you on Twitter. Tell us about that, how they can find you, the stuff you're producing. And WKDZ, it's a country station, is it? Do I have that right?
Yeah, it's a country station. So I'm not writing as much sports as I once was. I'm actually a news reporter for the Cadiz, Hopkinsville, and Princeton area. But living in Murray, I don't exactly fall asleep at the wheel when it comes to sports.
Sure.
The Memphis Grizzlies will actually be in town this weekend with Shaq Buchanan, former Defensive Player of the Year. So I'm hoping to stop by and see him on Saturday morning, get his thoughts about the upcoming season. And Murray State football, I try to go to home games when I can. They're on the bye week this week. So, it's really interesting. And I want to quickly mention that one of the things that I was proud of the OVC for doing this year was taking 2 conference teams and making 2 non-conference games across the slate to rectify JSU and EKU losing, falling out of the league. I thought that was very progressive. So that's why I'm among a few, at least, that think that there may be some plans in place. But yeah, I'm active on social media, mostly for sports. And then I keep up with news stories that are in the Princeton, Hopkinsville, and Cadiz area. So
listen, I'm an old country music guy myself. I worked for a country music station here in St. Louis for quite a while.
Yeah, I listen to country and a lot of classic rock. So that's part of it.
I remember when I first started working at a country station, I didn't know one artist. I mean, I'd heard some names, right? And people would say, "Were you there because you like it?" I said, "No, I'm there because they give me money. That's why I'm there." And then I grew into my appreciation for, the artists and the music and the genre and all that, and really did enjoy it for quite a while. Gentlemen, I appreciate it greatly. We've been doing this live. I'll also throw it out later at a taped version so people can get it all over again. Appreciate it. Bob Belvin, thanks so much. Ed Marlowe, thank you. We'll stay in touch. I know this is going to be a developing story over the next several months and maybe a year.
Absolutely.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in today on Voices of the Valley, a part of the Valley Hoops Insider website. I'm Harry Schroeder, reminding you, since you've been there, make it a better place. We'll talk to you again real soon.